Another belated episode of the Joe Sixpack Show. Joe Sixpack here. How you doing? I had an interesting question. My stepson came up to me and told me that my fiance, the love of my life, didn't understand what Wall Street was all about. What this Occupy Wall Street thing is. So I figured I'd explain it in layman's terms for everybody out there. That maybe kind of but you're busy with your lives and stuff like that. We're running the rat races and whatnot. Um, Basically, it's a two-fold problem. First of all, we have what we call corporate cronyism. What that means is that the politicians that you see, the ones that are dangled out in front of us, are backed by different companies. And depending on whether you want the war machine to run the country, you would vote Republican. And if you want big pharmaceutical, big hospital, big insurance, big education, then you want the Democrats. So that's what they're backed by. They should wear like racing suits, like a NASCAR, so that people would know who's actually sponsoring these people and giving them millions and thousands and millions of dollars, so that they can go out and campaign and push their message and lie and cheat and steal to us, so that they can appease their corporate sponsors. But this is a little list here of. It's not all inclusive, but this kind of gives you an idea, sometimes a visual representation instead of me just, seeing my ugly face. Maybe I can show you a little bit about what's going on. You got big farm, big hospital, big insurance, big education. And all those sound pretty good, actually, on this side. All those sound pretty good on this side, because it's all, health. But when you centralize things like that, what that does is create power struggles, and it doesn't allow the free market to work in the way it's supposed to work. There shouldn't be any centralization in a free market. The free market is the free market, and it works if you let it. The problem is that everybody wants to be fair and everybody wants to control, but the market, when you control the market, it creates greed and frustration. And you have scenarios now like what we have, where we have constant 10% unemployment, and it's because of the free market. People are trying to control something that you have very little control over. On the Republican side, there's all this protection, but at what cost? The cost of thousands of American lives, where we're protecting borders of other nations and not our own. And the cost of rebuilding other nations other than our own. So you see, either side that you vote on, you're pretty much screwed, because all our money is going to the war machine, which is supposed to protect us, but it's just making huge profits, or big farm, big hospital, and big insurance, which sounds good on the surface until you look deeper and realize that these guys are just making money hand over fist. And we get lower quality products, we get more people hooked on drugs, bigger hospital bills, bigger insurance bills. Everything has been going up the past 4 years except my paycheck. That's all I know. And it's because of the second part of what I want to do. I got my 5 minutes marked, so let's move on to the second part. So that's the first part, that we have this corporate cronyism, where we have corporate sponsorship of the candidates, and if you don't have enough money because you're against corporate cronyism, then the corporates aren't going to give you money, so you don't have enough money to campaign and get your message out, which is why it's critical to have things like YouTube and things like Facebook and things like Twitter to get the message out. This is a new medium that isn't controlled by the corporate media. This here is the second part of the picture. What happened is, starting around 2000, the U.S. government allowed anybody pretty much to get a loan for a house. They wanted to make everything fair and everything free, and that they were going to back all the housing loans. So banks started loaning money out hand over fist because they were going to make money on it no matter what happens because the government was going to guarantee it. So they started loaning out these loans at 5% interest, 5 to 30%, whether it's a house loan or a credit card loan to U.S. citizens. Okay. Then what happened was that the bubble happened, that the housing market dried up. There were no more houses to buy. There were no more people to buy the houses, so the prices started to fall. People started to panic. People started losing money on their houses. Their houses became upside down because they paid way too much for it. And so they just started bailing on these houses. And then we had the mortgage foreclosure prices because the banks were giving away money to people who didn't deserve it. And that's just not how the free market works. It's all about supply and demand. So what the Federal Reserve did was print out a bunch of money, digital money. It's not like they printed out like bills of 50s and hundreds. Digital money, and gave it to the big banks at 0% interest. They gave $16 trillion. Some of the banks include Chase, Citigroup, Goldman Sachs, among many others. Citigroup being the biggest taker of about $2 trillion. Excuse me. At 0% interest, mind you. And the Federal Reserve took on all that bad debt by printing more money. A lot of people, the big catchword is that they print money out of thin air. And that's not really the case. And this is the part that a lot of people don't grasp. When you increase the supply of something, you decrease its value. So you increase the money supply, digital money supply, that creates an inflation that is put on U.S. citizens to pay the $16 trillion that the big banks got at 0% interest. Now, the big banks, give them credit, they got to pay this back. But how do they pay it back? They loan it back to the U.S. citizens at 5 to 30% interest. You see that? So the big banks got 0% interest, 16 trillion from the Federal Reserve, which just printed it. 16, that's all they did was to print the money to the big banks, Chase, Citigroup, Goldman Sachs, a few others out there. Wells Fargo is another one. They lend it back out, 5 to 30% interest loans, back to the U.S. citizens, and then the U.S. citizens have to eat in 10% inflation plus when you include food and fuel into their CPI, which is what the Federal Reserve looks at. That's the Consumer Price Index. That number, that CPI, does not include food and fuel. That's how they can say, oh, inflation's been staying at 2% for the past decade. Well, that's not the case when you include food and fuel. The two most important things that pretty much every Joe Sixpack out there uses. 10% plus. That's pretty conservative in my opinion. I've seen stuff double. Gas prices have doubled since 2008 when it hit its bottom. And if they'd let the market do its job, we would be out of this mess by now. But they decided to give out all this loans to save these banks from their mistake of lending out too much money to people who didn't deserve that money. And now those people are defaulting on their loans, and now the government's bailing them out through the Federal Reserve, which is a private bank. The Federal Reserve is not a public bank, or is not a part of the government, per se. They like to claim it. They like to shift the blame one way or the other, like wherever suits them best. If they say, well, if somebody's attacking them because they're a government entity, they'll say, well, we're private. We don't, you can't touch us. We're private. And then if somebody shifts the blame and says that, that they're a government enterprise or a private enterprise, no, we're part of the government. We have a appointed chairman, Bren Bernanke, and blah, 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 blah. So that's how they get away. That's how they've been getting away with this ruse for over almost 100 years. By 2013, it'll be 100 years that this crap has been going on. So We pay back the Federal Reserve through inflation. That's how that $16 trillion is going to get paid back. So it's not printed out of thin air. It's printed at the expense of U.S. citizens through inflation. And this Ponzi scheme has been going on for 100 years. And that is what Occupy Wall Street is all about. I hope I made some sense, and I hope it turned the light on in some people's eyes. It's Joe Sixpack signing off.